Good morning. So, before we get into our class math lesson, I just wanted to get you caught up. I know you've been away for a couple of weeks on vacation. How was Disney, by the way? Good. Awesome. So, we've gone over decimals in our class for the past couple weeks, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So, I printed off a couple of worksheets for you to practice on, and I'll go over the first few with you, and hopefully we'll get you caught up within the next week or so. Right. Yeah, decimals can seem confusing in the beginning, but I'll kind of give you a couple of tricks just to help you out. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about adding decimals. That's probably the most easy. So let's take a look at this first problem right here. 23 and 1900ths added to 21 and 3100ths. Saying 1900ths and 3100ths is most accurate, but if you want to say 0.19 or 0.31, that'll be okay. Just know how to accurately call them, just for future reference. Alright, so we have 23 and 1900ths, 21 and 3100ths. So the key thing with adding decimals is to not get tripped up by the decimal mark. You're still going to do everything the same way, but you're just going to make sure that your decimal point is lined up completely with the other two. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding. 9 plus 1, we know that is 10. So we put the 0 there. We carry the 1 over here. Alright, 3 plus 1 is 4, plus that 1 that we carried over is 5. So far, so good. Don't worry about that decimal point. Let's move on to the next number. 3 plus 1 is 4. And then 2 plus 2 is 4. So our answer is 44 and 50 hundredths, or 44.50. Yeah, that doesn't look too hard at all. Let's go ahead and do another one together before we move on. If for some reason you think we need some extra practice, I can even do a couple more with you. Okay? So let's take this number right here. Remember, go ahead and put the decimal point right there first. That's going to make it easy for you to remember that you need that decimal point in that specific spot for the answer. Alright, and then just add as normal. 7 plus 3 is 10. Right? Put our 1 up here. 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 6 plus 4 is 10. We carry our 1 there. Then 6 plus 4 is 10 again, but then we add that 1, making it 11. So our answer is 110 and 70 hundredths. Alright. Yeah, I can do another one with you. And really, this worksheet, you don't have to do all of them. I would say if you could maybe do one row or two just to show me that you understand the concept, that is perfectly fine, because I don't want to create a ton more work for you. Alright, let's do one more together before we move on. 3 plus 2. Oh, that's right, I forgot to put my decimal point there. Thank you for reminding me. See, you're already getting the hang of it. 3 plus 2 is 5. 9 plus 8 is 17. And then you just carry over the 1, even though it's over the decimal point. 2 plus 0 is 2, but then we add our 1, which gives us 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. Yeah, very easy. If you know how to add, you just have one more step and adding that decimal point. Perfect. Do you feel comfortable with it? All right, let's move right along. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you, so all right, let's put this over here in your folder. So that you can take that home. Right. Yeah, you just need to do a couple of rows. All right, if you could just do 2 rows for me, that would be perfect. I would really appreciate it. Awesome. All right. Now, let's move on to subtraction. All right. Now, again, the concept is the same as addition. All right. So you're going to subtract these numbers as normal, and then you're just going to make sure that you keep that decimal point lined up. So let's go ahead, put our decimal point right there. All right, let me scoot this over so you can see it. All right, so instead of adding, we are going to be subtracting. So 5 minus 3 gives you 2, right? So far, so good. 8 minus 8 gives you 0. And I apologize for my handwriting. Right, I am left-handed, so it makes my handwriting a little funky. All right, moving right along. 5 minus 0 is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. Okay, so again, pretty easy. You just have that added step of putting that decimal point down here and making sure it is lined up. All right, let's move on to this one right here. And this one may involve a little bit of regrouping. So again, when you're regrouping, you do the same thing. Don't worry about that decimal point. Just put it down here so you can keep track of where it needs to go. All right, so because we can't do 2 minus 8, because 8 is larger than 2, remember we have to regroup. So cross this off and put a 12 there. All right, and we are borrowing 1 from this, so this becomes an 11, and I'm doing that because I automatically know that we're going to have to borrow from this because 5 is larger than 2. So then this becomes 3. All right, so now we are ready to go ahead and subtract. Now you don't have to do all of your regrouping in the beginning, but I find that that can be at least helpful to get everything set up on top so that you can just focus on subtracting. So 12 minus 8 is 4, right? Exactly. 11 minus 5 is 6. Then we have 3 minus 2 is 1. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. Now, when you're putting your final answer, I would like you to put a 0 here, at least initially, just so that I know that you subtracted these and I can see your work. But the reality is, you normally would not even have to put a 1 there. It would just be 1.64 or 1 64 hundredths. So that's your choice. At least on this worksheet, I want you to show your work. So if there's a 0 at the end or at the beginning that we would normally drop, go ahead and put it there so that I can see your work. You want to do one more? Absolutely. All right, so we have here 84 and 27 hundredths minus 42 and 52 hundredths. So let's go ahead and put our decimal point right there. Now, just looking up here, I know that I'm going to have to do some regrouping because 2 is less than 5. So we're going to make that a 12, borrow 1 from here and make that a 3. Looks good so far. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. My allergies have been acting up. I'm allergic to Christmas trees, and obviously I can't forgo a Christmas tree. So 7 minus 2 is 5. 12 minus 5 is 7. 3 minus 2 is 1. And 8 minus 4 is 4. Alright, so that gives us an answer of 41 and 75 hundredths. Okay, so like the addition one, I would love it if you could maybe do 2 rows and bring it back to me. You don't have to do the whole worksheet because I know that's a lot, but I just want to see that you understand the concept. All right. Right. Absolutely. You know, these don't have to be due tomorrow. I don't expect you to get them done because I know you have other homework. So maybe if you could get them back to me, let's say in a week, maybe by next week, that would be awesome. Yeah, you can submit them one at a time. So if you get your multiplication done, or subtraction, or addition, or division done first, you can definitely do that. Okay? Are you comfortable with this? Perfect. All right. So we are done with this part. So let's go ahead and put that in your folder just to make sure that we have that all taken care of. All right, now we are moving on to multiplying decimals. Now again, the steps are different, I would say, than adding and subtracting, but they don't have to be confusing and they don't have to be hard. Okay? Absolutely. So, the key difference when you are multiplying decimals is going to be you're not going to worry about the decimal point. You're not going to put it down here. Okay? What I want you to do is just pretend that those decimal points are not there. Alright? And we are going to multiply as usual. Alright? And obviously we're going to be doing 3-digit by 3-digit. Just treat it like that. And I know it's a lot, but you guys have already done 3-digit by 3-digit. You are really good at that, so I know that you'll be great. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So remember, when we're doing multi-digit by multi-digit, or even just 1-digit by multi-digit, you go up, over, 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 up, over, and then with the 2, over, over, up. Okay, so you gotta hit all of the numbers. So let's start with our ones place. 7 times 8. Yeah, it's 56. So we put our 6 here and we regroup as usual, right? Now, 7 times 5 is 35, but plus 5, that is 40. We bring our 4 over there. 7 times 4 is 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, right? All right, so we have our numbers there. We are done with that 7, okay? Now we need to move on to the 3. Yeah, you could call that your 10 spot if you wanted to. Obviously, there's a decimal there, so it's not quite like that. But just remember, you move over in place value each time that you are multiplying, right? So we start with that 3 now. And remember, whenever you are moving on to the next number down here, what do you need to add? Right. Before you even start multiplying, you need to add that 0. All right, so 3 times 8. Right. 24. All right, and then let's go ahead and just kind of cross these out so that we can keep track. So we have our 2 there. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 gives you, 17. Now we put our 1 up there. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Now, see what I'm doing here? I am keeping all of these lined up. That's very important for adding, right? Yeah. So let's cross that out. Let's scratch these out. And if you do this on a whiteboard, obviously you can just erase part of this. Now, what do we need to do before we move on to the 2? Right. Put 2 zeros. Remember, you're adding a 0 each time you go to a new number. So 2 times 8 is, 16. We put our 1 up here. All right, 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Put our 1 up there. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. All right, now, if you don't have room on here, because I know my handwriting is just a little bit smaller than yours, you are welcome to get maybe some graph paper. That will help you keep all of the numbers lined up. Yeah, you could do it on normal paper, but I think graph paper might make it a little easier for you. Yeah, I'll make sure to put some graph paper in your folder so that you can take it home. Okay. Now, what do we do now? We have multiplied by all of these numbers here on the bottom. 2, 3, and 7. Right. Now we add all of these lines together. Okay. And I apologize, this is a little bit crooked. So, 6 plus 0 plus 0. Yep, it just gives you 6. Then 4. All right. And then 7 plus 2 is 9. 9 plus 6 is 15. 3 plus 3 is 6, 7, 8. And then 9 plus 1 is 10. Now, notice we have not even looked at our decimal points. We've literally just treated this as a whole number. Now is the time that we take stock of where our decimal point should go. All right, so this is the trick. What I like to do is I like to draw a kind of a bubble around all of the numbers behind the decimal point. Sometimes there may be one number behind the decimal point. Sometimes there may be 2 numbers, 3, 4. It could be any number, but I like drawing a little bubble around them and then counting them. So right here, we have 2 numbers behind the decimal point. So I'm going to start right here and go over 1, 2 spaces. Okay, and that gives us an answer of 1,085 and 46 hundredths. See how that works? So save the decimal point step for the last bit after you've done all of this, okay? And don't worry about it. I know a lot of your classmates that I've worked with have gotten confused by the decimal point and where it's at. And what they end up doing is they end up lining it up and bringing it down so that it's right here instead of right there. And that's totally normal because addition and subtraction works that way. But with multiplication, remember you have to count the number of decimal places behind the point. Okay, let's do one more of these. And just instead of having you do a couple different rows, because I know this involves a lot of work, go ahead and we'll do this one together. Just go ahead and finish the rest of this row, all right, and bring it back to me. If you get a lot of them wrong or you're confused about something, we can always take some time in the morning to do some of the extra problems. But I don't want to overwhelm you, and I know that pretty much multiplying 3-digit by 3-digit does take a lot of work. So, do you feel like you understand where this is at? Yeah. Let's do one more together, and let's see how comfortable you are with doing this second problem. All right. So we have 70 and 5/10 and 86 and 2/10. Okay. decimal point is not there. All right, and multiply like you would any kind of multi-digit number. So 2 times 5 is what? 10. Perfect. All right, then we carry over our 1. 2 times 0 is, of course, 0, because any number times 0, remember, it's like a Pac-Man. It eats it up. It's just gone. All right, but then we have that 1, right? So we're going to put a 1 there. 2 times 7 is what? 14. All right, so we are done with our 2. Let's scratch out that 1 just because I don't want it to get confusing. So then we move on to our 6. And remember, we always put a 0 before moving on to our next number. 6 times 5 is 30. Put our 3 up there. 6 times 0 is what? 0. But because we have that 3 up there, it becomes 3. Then 6 times 7 is 42. I apologize, I'm getting a little off track there, but we need to keep those numbers lined up or else there could be some confusion. Right. Yeah, it's because I have it turned at a weird angle so you can see it. All right. So we're done with the 6. What? Yeah, I think I definitely could benefit from some practice with writing my numbers. You're absolutely right. All right, now we move on to 8. And what do we do before we get started? Yep. So now we put 2 zeros. Remember, every line you add 1 more 0. All right, 8 times 5 is what? It's okay. You can figure it out. Remember, just count by 5s. I'll give you a minute. Right. So even if you can just find a number that you do know, so you already know that 7 times 5 is 35, right? So just add 5 more to find 8 times 5. Perfect, 40. That is correct. All right, we're going to put our 4 up there. We already know that 8 times 0 is going to be 0, but don't forget about adding that 4. So we're going to put our 4 there. All right, and then 7 times 8, or 8 times 7, do you remember what that is? Perfect, 56. Yeah. All right, now we add these together. Anything added to 0, 0. Okay, 1. All right, what's 4 plus 3? Yep. 7, 6, 7, 10, and 6. Perfect. All right, now that we are done with those, what do? Remember what we did over here? Oh, yeah, that's because I'm left-handed, so I tend to pick up the ink. And yeah, no worries. Right, you draw a bubble around the numbers behind the decimal point. How many are there here? There are 2, right? So you start right over here and go 1, 2, boom. You have your answer. 6,077 and 10 hundredths, or you could say 1/10. That's 0. You could absolutely drop that if you wanted to, but I would say for the purpose of working through these, go ahead and just keep those zeros, whether they're in the front or in the back, just so that I can see you work through them. And then as you keep going, you'll eventually just drop those. But just in this beginning phase, I want to make sure that you guys understand what happens as you add, subtract, and multiply all of these numbers, right? So what I want you to work on, just work on these 3. I don't want you to do a couple rows because, again, it took us a while to get through that because there are so many steps. And so I don't want to overwhelm you. And if you understand the concepts, I don't see why you should have to do all of these. You'll be caught up just fine. And remember, the reason that we're going through these is not just to give you more work. I don't want to give you a ton more work. want to get you caught up so that when we go over our lessons this week, you won't be completely lost. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So just do those 3, and you know what? Even if you get these done during your morning work or afternoon work times, you can just submit them to me and they'll be done. But if you have any questions or you forget some of these steps, just let me know and we can work through a couple more of these. All right, do you feel good about this? Perfect. All right, now let's go ahead and get these in your folder. Okay. All right, now dividing with decimals. This can be a little bit tough. And again, it has a different process than addition or subtraction or multiplication. So just to recap, remember with addition and subtraction, you don't worry about moving the decimal point. You just keep it lined up with all of the numbers that you're adding or subtracting, right? So remember, that key is the decimal points need to be lined up, right? Yeah. Now, with multiplication, the decimal points don't need to be lined up as much as the numbers are lined up. On our examples, we obviously went through numbers where both the decimal and the numbers were lined up. But we don't even count how many decimal spots we need for the answer until the very end. Now, when you are dividing a decimal by a decimal, the important thing to remember is that you need to have your divisor, remember that's our smaller number here, the number that we are dividing by. You need your divisor to be a whole number, okay? It's not a big deal if this is a decimal because we put our decimal point up here. So if this were a whole number and this were a decimal, we would just put our decimal point right there. And that would not be a big problem. But I wanted to show you these problems because this is going to be an extra step, okay? And it involves the following steps as well. If you had a whole number and a decimal for the dividend, okay? Now, how are we going to make 9.2 a whole number? What do you think we can do? Oh, that's a possibility. Yeah. What are some other thoughts maybe? What could we do? Think about which way we need to move the decimal point. Right. We could just move it 1 point to the right like that. Now, it's important to remember that whenever you move the decimal point on this side for the divisor, you have to do the same thing with the dividend. So if you move the decimal point to the right 1 spot, you also have to move the decimal point to the right on this spot too. In essence, you are multiplying both of these numbers by powers of 10. Remember, it was several lessons ago we went over powers of 10, right? You add a 0, or you move your decimal point over 1 space when you're multiplying by powers of 10. Exactly. So that's kind of what we're doing. And remember, you have to do the same thing. If you multiply by 10 to make 9.292, you also have to multiply 708 and 4/10 by 10. All right? And this keeps the ratio the same because remember when we first started talking about division, not about decimals, but about division, we talked about how they're related to fractions. And they really are fractions, right? So that means that we need to keep that ratio the same. So whatever you do to this side to change the decimal point, you need to do to this side as well, okay? So just remember that. If you move the decimal point over for this number, you have to move it over the same number of times for this number. All right, so now that we have our decimal point moved over, we can either do one of two things. Now, if this was still, if there were numbers behind here, you would put the decimal point right there. But right now, with this problem, it's really a whole number, isn't it? It's not 9.2 anymore, it's 92. And it's not 708.4 or in 4/10, but it's 7,084. So that means that we really don't need to put this up here. But I'm going to put it up here just to show you that it doesn't change the answer to have this here. Okay, so if you want to rewrite this, I'm going to rewrite it just to kind of clean it up a little bit. And we're just going to do this one problem. And if you could do maybe this one and this one, just finish the row just like we did for multiplication. Normally I would do more of these with you, but some of my friends will be coming in from PE soon. Yeah, and then we'll be done with our study time. Yeah. All right, so we have two very big numbers here. 7,084 divided by 92. Now, let's think about this for a minute. Can you divide 7 by 92? No, right? Can you divide 70 by 92? No, because it's still smaller. We need to find a number that's bigger than 92 so we can divide it. So let's go ahead and pull in that 8. I'm just going to kind of draw a little bowl underneath it. Right, so we need to ask that question of how many times can 92 go into 708? Now, this is the tough thing because obviously you don't know in your head how many times that 92 can go into 708, and I don't either, right? And it's not a problem to troubleshoot over on the side here. And by troubleshoot, I mean it's not a problem to multiply 92 by a few different numbers over here to find the right answer. So sometimes what I like to do is instead of just picking a random number, sometimes I like to cover up this digit. So then we're just working with 70. And this digit, so then we're just working with 9. So think about maybe a fact, a multiple of 9 that can get you close to 70, and we'll just start there. Right, 9 times 8 does give you 72, doesn't it? Right, now we're not dealing with 9 or 90, but we're dealing with 92. So let's pull it back a little bit. All right, because I think if we were to do 92 times 8, or even 9 times 8, that would give you 72. So we know that that's going to be too high if we multiply 92 by 8. So tell you what, let's go right here and let's do 92 times 7. And just see what that gives us. It may not be right, it may be too high or too low, but that's why we write these things out and don't just guess, right? And make sure that when you're doing these problems that you show your work, show the numbers that you are multiplying by, just so that I can see that you're not only just guessing on the answers, but also how you got the answer you got. Yeah, and I know it takes a lot of time. It does. But it's better this way, and you'll be more likely to get a right answer. Okay? So, 7 times 2. Yep, that is 14. 9 times 7. Do you remember what that is? Right, it's 63, isn't it? Then you add 1, so that would be 64. Now, 644 isn't necessarily close to 708, but for the purposes of this number, it is. Because if you add 92 to 644, it will be bigger than 708. So we can't get any closer to that, can we? So we put our 7 above here, and we are going to subtract, right? Yep. So we subtract 4 from 8. What does that give us? Yep, it gives us 4. Now, remember, don't get confused by this. We still have to follow the rules of subtraction. So because 0 is less than 4, we can't subtract. All right, so we have to borrow from the 7 and make that a 6. And I'm just going to insert a little 1 there instead of crossing it out because we have limited space. 10 minus 4 is what? Right. All right. Right. And then we have that. Do you understand how we got this? Great. And I know it can be a little bit confusing because you're not only having to multiply when you're dividing, but you're also having to subtract. And we can go a little bit more over subtraction. But just remember that anytime this number up here is smaller than this number down here when you're subtracting just the individual digits, you have to borrow, right? And remember, we did that with our subtraction. Because remember, if you have 0 minus 4, that's not going to give you a whole number. That's going to give you a negative number, right? Exactly. So you need to borrow a 1 from the other number and bring it over. And that's why this becomes 6 and that becomes a 10. You're borrowing from the next number over. Now, we are left with 64, and we don't need to keep this 0, obviously. So what do we do next? Right. You bring down your 4. And look, 644. We already know how many times 92 goes into 644, don't we? Boom. We already did the work. And that makes it super easy. And then we know that 644 minus 644 will give you 0. So there is no remainder. And granted, when you're dealing with decimals, and we're not going to get into it here, all of these should be whole numbers. But we'll talk in future weeks about annexing zeros when there's a remainder. But don't worry about that right now. Yeah, just don't worry about that. Okay? Now, we don't have a decimal point in this answer because technically the decimal point would go right there. It's a whole number, so we don't need it. So I will accept an answer if you put a decimal point there, but really it's not required. And I'll tell you right now that all of these problems, they are going to have whole number answers. All right? So, remember our steps. It's the same as regular division, except for in the beginning, you have to make our divisor a whole number by moving over that decimal point 1 place. And remember, whatever you do to the divisor, you must do to the what? Yeah, you have to do to the dividend. All right, so you're dividing 92 and 7,084 instead of 9.2 and 708.4 or and 4/10, right? Exactly, and how we are able to move the decimal point over 1 is that we are multiplying by 10. And you can multiply by tens, hundreds, any powers of 10. depending on how many times you need to move over that decimal place. But because moving or multiplying by powers of 10 is very straightforward, you don't need to show your work. You don't need to show that. We already know that you're moving your decimal place over how many zeros there are, or how many powers of 10 it is, right? Exactly. So just remember, however many times you move over the decimal point with the divisor to get a whole number, that's how many points you have to move over with your dividend, okay? Yeah, super straightforward. Do you have any questions on this? Yeah. No, you do not have to do a couple of rows. Tell you what, just go ahead and do this problem and that problem. They're a little bit less on here because, like the multiplication, it does involve a little bit more work. So it is perfectly fine. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're out of time right now just because some of your classmates are coming back from PE and it's actually time for you guys to go your group. All right. So tell you what, when you get back from PE, during our homework time, let's go over some more of these problems, and maybe I'll have you work them out by yourself and kind of pretend to be the teacher, and we'll see how you do with that. Yes, if you finish what I give you before you go home, you don't need to take these home and do more. So as long as this one and that one get done, it's okay if you do it here or if you do it at home. Yeah, I know you already have homework. So tell you what, let's work on these during your homework time here, so you won't have to take these home. Okay? Let's put this in your folder. Yeah. And what I will do is, while you are at PE, I will go ahead and put some graph paper in your folder so that you can take it with you if you need it, or you can just take it out here while you're working with it. Yeah. And then we will start working together again after your PE time, okay? Yeah, so it seems like you're all caught up, so as long as you can get those right, and as long as you understand the concepts behind them, you should be fine. You can absolutely do this stuff because I've seen you do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with whole numbers, and you're very good. We're just adding another step or two, right? Exactly. So once you get these done, hopefully we'll be all cut up by next week. And next week we're going to talk about annexing zeros. Don't worry about what it means right now, but it has to do with dividing with decimals, okay? And it should be super easy. Once you get these concepts down, you can definitely get everything else down. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for working hard with me. I know it was a lot. Hope you have fun at PE. I think you guys are doing hot